Welcome, everybody, to episode 13 of the Pursuit of Precision podcast. Today, we had the great opportunity to interview Tom Saracino, a builder, a custom home builder at that, of over 35 years in the business. He has tons of experience in his industry and shared unbelievable stories about where he started out to where he is now. Can't wait for you guys to hear all about it. Let's head to the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pursuit of Precision podcast. My name is Ryan Jaros, and over the next 12 months, I'm interviewing 50 of the most successful, intelligent, influential, and overall happy people that I can in order to hear their story and share with all of you what I learn along the way. Today, we are so grateful to have Tom Saracino on the podcast today. Thank you so much for making the time to be here today. We really appreciate it.
I'm honored to be here, and I've never done anything like this, but I look forward to it. And I'm probably not in that category you're talking about in 50, but depends how many people you interview overall. Maybe I'd be in the top 50.
I think you're going to be great, and I think you're gonna offer a lot of value. So I wouldn't have asked you if I didn't think so. But
thank you,
guys. So Tom is the owner of Rock Building Company. He's been in business now, incorporated for 35 years. And for those of you that don't know anything about the construction industry or building homes or anything of that nature, being in business for 35 years, not only through the ups and downs of what's happened with the economy, but also just being a custom home builder, there are tons of ups and downs and tons of things that you have to go through in order to make sure that you stay in business for that long. And I want to commend you on that and congratulate you on a great career thus far. And thank you again for being on today. So,
well, thank you very much. It's for anybody, it's a journey. 35 years is a journey, and it's a pretty long journey. I started at 13 years old. I had an uncle that was a partner in a building company, and I used to go and clean basements, do whatever they needed. I'd sweep out houses, wheelbarrow barrels of stone down the street, whatever needed to be done. And it was just a job while I was in high school to get me through the summer and make some money and start like that.
And this was at 13.
That was at 13 years old. I was they had me driving a Chevy pickup with a clutch and a 3 on the tree at 13 years old around the subdivision. Obviously I couldn't go out in the streets and stuff, but it was, I learned to drive at that point, and in a challenging clutch too. So it was fun.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Sure.
You know what, for anybody out there, you got to enjoy what you do, regardless of what you do. You got to have fun at work, because you're going to be at work for the majority of your waking time.
Yeah.
And that's so important.
No, 100%. And you dove right into it, but I usually start by asking people, what did it look like before all these wins? Obviously, you've learned so much. You've built so many contacts, I'm sure, over the years in terms of how you've gotten deals now as you continue to go. I'm sure it's gotten much easier to get deals now than it was your first 5 years in business, I would assume.
Yeah, most of my business comes from word of mouth. I don't really advertise anything. Yeah. I don't even, I've got some social media stuff that I don't even look at it, because I was born about 25 years too early, and I don't really understand that stuff very well.
Yeah.
But it's I've got plenty on my plate with word of mouth, and I'm blessed and happy with what I do. Fortunate enough to make a decent enough living to take care of my family, and I'm not a wealthy person, but I'm comfortable that we'll make it through. You talked about the ups and downs, and like I started, it's a journey. And for me personally, I was going to go to college, get my degree, and go off into another business. Yeah. And when I was in college, I wasn't getting much out of college. I went for 3 years, and I probably had 3 years to go. Yeah. So I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go to work for my uncle and take a job with him and stay on board. Unfortunately, a year later, the economy went nosedive. And that's one thing about the building industry, especially residential, especially high-end residential. when there's hills and valleys in the economy, the hills and valleys are like this. It's just a whole different thing with this industry. Some of the valleys that I've gone through are just, somebody would call up and say, hey, I need somebody to put a shelf in my closet, and I'd run over there, just to make sure I was working and getting something coming in.
Yeah.
So that was in some real tough times, like back in 2008, 2009. That area there was a real rough go, but we went through a lot of ups and downs in the economies, and that you can't stretch yourself too far when things are good, because they can turn around fast and go the other way.
No doubt.
And then vice versa, you want to make sure you keep working hard to do whatever you can to keep income coming in, and eventually that starts building back into where income is coming in strongly.
For sure.
So
yeah, I'd like, if you don't mind, to go back to kind of where this all started, right? So again, where we were framing all that was to say, like, obviously you've done a great job building your book of business at this point, and things, I'm sure, like I said, are in a great place compared to where they were when you started off. And so I'd like to go back to kind of day one in terms of when you started putting all this together. So you obviously framed that initial early days when you were 13, 14, just
right.
Getting started, helping out, sweeping up, I'm sure, doing a bunch of the stuff that no one else wanted to do. And I'd like to know kind of where that transition went in terms of, you said you were going to potentially go to college. So what did those years look like? So you started in the summers, just kind of helping out, doing whatever you can.
Right.
And then at what point towards the end of high school were you thinking about careers and what you were going to do? What was your mindset
really
at that point?
Didn't come till a little bit later. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to get my degree, and I wanted to get into some kind of business.
Okay.
And I had worked for my uncle for several years, and so I knew a little bit about the building business.
Yeah.
And when I decided that, college is not for me, I was about 20 years old. I decided to leave the industry. I went to work for him permanently, and but it didn't last. They built a lot of homes. They were a lot of the homes that were like ranches, colonials, quad levels in Warren, Sterling Heights, Troy area, also out in Plymouth and Canton out there.
Interesting. So more repeatable style, the cookie. I don't want to say cookie cutter, but
you're using basically three basic plans, and they did make changes and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's almost cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Now the economy really started going down in 78, 79.
Okay.
I stayed on board with them. Fortunately, they kept me on board because I was probably I was a pretty hard worker, and I was probably the lowest guy on payroll for construction management. And we finished up a bunch of houses that they had under construction in that area. I used to travel from where I lived over on the east side down in Grosse Pointe Park out to Sterling Heights, to Troy, to Plymouth, Canton, back to Troy, Sterling Heights, and then back to Grosse Pointe Park on a daily basis just to get stuff wrapped up. And at some point in time, we finished everything up, and he said, look, we're just going to, hold tight, and we're not doing anything. We're not starting anything. So I knew that it was time for me to go.
What were some of the early things that you learned in those years when you were obviously the bottom of the totem pole? Because again, now we're talking about, you're the guy that's telling said kid to go sweep up or do whatever you ever got to do. You're in the opposite position at this point. What were some things that you learned early on, even at 14, 15, 16 that carried true to today?
You learn a lot of things. Like I hated cleaning the mess up, and in those days it was a little different than it is today. You go to any job site where there's a professional running the job site. There's a porta-can there for the people. These people used to take care of their business down in a basement. And I thought that was so sick, but I thought it was normal because I'm a kid and I didn't know much about the business.
Yeah.
But for me personally, it helped me develop a set of what I call our job site rules for all the contractors. And really, it's all common sense. You shouldn't have to read those job site rules. It's stuff that, If you have food and you're going to eat lunch, that's fine. Clean up your mess. Take your scraps with you. Don't throw them in the construction pile. Animals can come and get them. Little things like that you shouldn't have to teach people, but you have to have them. You have to put them on the job site, and you have to, say, make sure you read the job site rules because it's very important. And it's all about professionalism is what it all boils down to. And it's common sense stuff. And
so you started to develop these things, your opinions at least, at a young age, 15, 16, like, maybe that's not quite right, and really starting to develop your opinions on those.
Right. And it's a process. It ended up that when I started, went a little further along, which I don't want to jump ahead to yet because I want to tell you where I went from where I was, but it just develops as it goes to get more and more professional, and it's all the little things that you learn. You can't instantaneously do this stuff when you're young until you get exposed to things and you say, that's a problem, we got to address it.
You have to experience the problem almost in order to know how to fix it.
Now, if you experience it twice and you still get it wrong, then you got a problem that you got to address with yourself.
Yeah.
So, but after the economy went bad, I was doing odd jobs. Building.
And you were how old at this time?
I was 21.
Okay.
About there, and I was building decks. My uncle had me. They paid me a fee to cut grass at all the models. They had models in different subdivisions, so I'd go around and cut the grass and things like that. So I was surviving. I was living with my parents, and that I didn't have much expense. So
is that something that you would recommend? I know obviously there's a lot of talk on that at that transitional phase in people's lives where they could go out and get a place for themselves and start developing some independence, or they could choose the alternative route to stay with their parents and save money and go about things in a slower manner. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I think that's a big transition period that a lot of kids go through.
Yeah, you know what? Here's the way I would put it. I guess it's a personal thing. You don't know what anybody's family life is like.
Yeah.
But if you have a good family life and your parents want you to be home and save money, listen to them.
Take advantage of the opportunity.
Take advantage of the opportunity. Absolutely. I've got a 27-year-old daughter right now that she moved back here from Chicago, and she's staying with us. And it's smart. She's doing well. She's got a good job and everything, but she has no need to get a place and go out. So for now she's living with us, which is great. She's home. I love it myself, and she's fine living at home.
Yeah. She's
got my spot in the garage for her car, so my truck's outside.
Sounds like a Tom thing to do based on how I know you. But moral of the story, if it's a good situation, a good environment, something that's going to improve your growth rather than hinder it.
Absolutely.
That's the way to go. It sounds like what your thoughts are.
Or if you just can't afford it too,
yeah.
you have to decide what sacrifices you have to make. Somebody who has a very detrimental situation with their family, I would recommend somehow getting into something else, getting away from it, and set yourself for your own views and your own way of living. But then you've got to work hard because now you've got that nut to crack every month.
That's what I was going to ask you, though. Do you think there's merit in the pressure and adversity that comes with I have no choice? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm sure there is, but again, that's an individual thing. I mean, it depends on the person. They've got to have whatever you go after, you got to have it in here, not just in your head, but you got to have your heart in it, and that's going to enable you to want to do better, to pursue what you're after. It's hard for kids, especially I think nowadays, to find a route. That they're not exposed to too many things that the things that we were exposed to when I was young. We were never home watching TV or playing games on TV or that kind of stuff. We didn't have computers, nothing like that. So every day when I was young and I got home from school, I was off to the schoolyard with the guys playing basketball, baseball, football, depending on what season it was. I wasn't a hockey player back then. I didn't skate. Yeah. But we would be doing stuff until dark. And then you get home and you do your homework. I remember my dad always said, you got to be home before the streetlights are on. And I was pedaling my bicycle so hard some days saying, please God, don't let the streetlights come on. So it was, but you're exposed to the world. You're exposed to, working with people, and you're exposed to, no matter what you do, if you got people, you got your team and you got their team, and you're learning life skills just from that offense and defense.
And that's what I was going to ask you is a lot of times there's, this is right, this is wrong, is what kids are told without necessarily an explanation to why, right? They never chose to grow up in an age where technology is where it's at, and they never made any choice to be in that situation, right? So I think it is important maybe to give some feedback to why it's valuable for kids to get out and do that kind of stuff, right? So
absolutely, and that was a disadvantage for me because if my mom and dad said something, that was it.
Yeah,
you didn't argue with them, you didn't fight with them because that was it. And nowadays, and it makes it a little more difficult on themselves. I think kids, in many ways, they may know more stuff than their parents because they've been exposed to the internet and things that,
which is wild to think about, right?
It is wild to think about it. It really is, and what's one thing that's shameful is the way the world has gone in many ways. When I was a kid, they had a show, Leave It to Beaver. And that was just a typical show that was a family show that was all, good morals, good, the right stuff, the positive things, and the kids listened to the parents. In the past 15, 20 years, I see shows that they have on TV where the parents are idiots. And the kids are like running the parents.
Yeah, barking back.
And it's just, it really, I think, has led to a natural loss of respect for the way it should be.
Yeah.
And but it's just a different society. It's probably a little more difficult to find the niche you want to be in. People think that 4 years of college will help them. But it may not. Yeah. You go to college for 4 years, you could come out $100,000 in debt. You got to look at college as more of an opportunity to enhance what you want to do.
Yeah.
But you got to figure that out first.
Well, and I think going back to what you were talking about with the conversation or the dynamic between parents and kids, right? I think, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, it requires more conversation nowadays. Right. At the end of the day, like you said, it was do this because I said so. Well, as much as we might not like it, the reality of it is, like you said, they might have exposure to 1,000 things that they could have been told are right versus wrong. And so, although that's the case, it's the parents' responsibility to be open and have conversation with their kids about this is why it is this way. This is why it shouldn't be this way. What are your thoughts? And it's more of a conversation. Right. Where
absolutely. And, there's like like they say, there's a fine line between love and hate. Yeah. There's also a fine line between teaching kids because you need to still be able to have that firm, convincing portion of it.
Yeah.
But you also need to be receptive to and understand what they're looking for and what they want.
In the lens that they're coming through. Like I said, they didn't choose to be born in a situation where they've got iPads and TVs everywhere they go.
Absolutely.
Right? That wasn't their choice.
Right. But it's there.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to find that balance. Maybe you limit hours or things like that, but it's and try to do things to get them motivated. Try to get a little work ethic into them early. Make sure that they clean up their mess all the time. All those little things that basically end up instilling good habits in people.
Yeah.
Habits are huge. Good habits will help people for their whole life.
Because they're consistent through all factors of their life. It's not just one-dimensional.
If you work on a habit that you know is a good habit and you just keep doing it, even though it takes extra time, a little extra effort, eventually you'll always want to do that and get it done.
Yeah,
which is great.
It's a part of who you are at that point.
Bad habits are going to bring you down, and that's they're so opposite, but they are so important to try to take the bad ones down and bring the good habits up, and it'll enhance your life tremendously.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to get back to where we were, and so we were transitioning towards. You were going to college, or you didn't go to college, or you were deciding?
I did for 3 years. Then I went to work for my uncle.
Where were you at? Where'd you go to school?
For college?
Yeah.
Western Michigan University.
Okay.
And then I came back and lived at home and worked for my uncle. And then that's when things went down for the economy back in 1979. And we had a rough economy starting through 1979 through till about 1985. I was working odd jobs, cutting grass and building decks, whatever I could do. I kept hearing all these great stories about how great things were in Texas, and there's 1,000 people a day moving to Texas. So I decided I was going to go down and interview in Texas. I went down for a 2-week period. I sent some advance letters out to different building companies because I wanted to stay in the building industry, in residential specifically. So I gave myself 2 weeks, a week in Dallas and a week in Houston. And I went around and cold called on building companies, tried to set up any appointments I could. And in a 2-week period, I went and I would say probably at least 30, maybe 35 building companies that I went and interviewed at. And it didn't look like anything was going to pan out. This one company was a very, very big company in the Dallas area. At the time, they were called Fox and Jacobs was the name of the company. And I interviewed in Dallas, and they all seem to go well, but you got to wait and hear back. I thought it went pretty good, but I didn't hear anything back right away, and you're not sure what's going to happen, but you just keep going. I went to Houston, and Fox and Jacobs was also in Houston. They were a much, much smaller version than what it was in Dallas. They were huge in Dallas, and they were a smaller operation. And I thought, well, I interviewed with them. I don't need to go interview with them. I'll focus on trying to find a different builder for the time period. I had an afternoon where I didn't have anything, and I just decided to go and cold call on them. I just went there. And I went in, sat down, and talked to a guy for a little bit, and said, well, we're not really hiring anybody right now, but, just another typical conversation. And this was in Houston. And I interviewed with a guy that worked in the office. He was like the head of a department called Construction Services. And I think he liked me. So I went back, I drove back up north and didn't have anything lined up or any second interviews or anything like that. And then about a week later, I get a phone call from the guy in charge of personnel in Houston at Fox and Jacobs. And he says, hey, we got a job for you. He said, and this was on like a Friday. He said, but you got to be here by Wednesday morning to get to work. And so we went back and forth a little bit. Actually, the guy called me that I interviewed with that I thought kind of liked me. He says, I can get you a job. He says, he gave me the information out to be working in the office, and he said, but your salary is going to be, I think it was like $12,000. That's annual. That's not that back in those days that was not bad if I was living at home, but it was bad, trying to make it with an apartment and everything else. Yeah. I said, look, I can't do it for $12,000. I'd love to, but it's not worth it for me to come down there, try to live and probably get a ratty apartment somewhere. I'm going to keep going here. And he said, well, let me see if I can do anything. And he called me back, and he upped it to $15,000. And he said, but you got to be here by Wednesday morning to start. And this was on a Friday. I was in an architectural program at Macomb County Community College. And that's why I would recommend people taking classes to enhance what they want to do.
Yeah.
I don't want to sidetrack the story right now, but that was in my mind is I wanted to focus on the architectural aspect, and it was great. I learned drafting, and I learned we actually stick built a house with little miniature 2x4 studs.
Oh,
it was,
cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was all, you had plans to work from. You had to figure out the roof. You had to figure out everything. It was great.
Oh, that's amazing.
And that's from a community college.
Yeah. But it was more specific. You were able to target, what am I exactly looking to get out of it? You chose a class, you hand selected the class.
Exactly.
And it applied it directly to what you were trying to use. So people watching at home, I get what you're trying to get at is make sure that what you're investing in is truly towards something that's going to benefit you directly.
Exactly. Because I was working during the day, and I knew I wanted to stay in residential construction.
Yeah.
And even though I wasn't working for a building company or anything, I would do anything I could.
But you were investing in your knowledge,
exactly,
and your value,
and it helped me a lot, because immediately I learned how to read plans, and and I knew a little bit from having worked in the business, but I mean, you needed they gave you a whole commercial building, huge building, and you had to learn those plans, and you had to figure out everything with it. So that was commercial, but it was part of the architectural program. So anyways, I had to get out of my classes that I was in. I had to, I had to pack up, move down there, and I had a pickup truck, and I put all my stuff in a pickup truck and left on like early Monday morning, and I got down there on early Tuesday morning. I drove almost straight through. I just stopped and slept for about an hour. But drove to Houston. So I had one day to get an apartment and
Holy
get
smokes.
settled in and get to work the next morning. I was fortunate that I did get an apartment, but it was in kind of a ratty building, and it was just a little view with a parked car right in front of me. It's that was my bedroom window view. But there was another area, and I didn't want to go into this area because that's where my boss lived, and I didn't want to get too close. But I went there anyways just to check it out, and they had a studio apartment, second floor, overlooking the pool. I said, well, I don't care much what he thinks.
Yeah.
I'll take this one.
Yep.
I went back and canceled out of the other one, and that was great. He became a real close friend of mine, and which was a good relationship. So I got settled in. Oh boy, the problem with that was the unit was not clean. The individual that lived there had just moved out the day before, and they hadn't cleaned it yet. And the guy said, "Look, you can take it, but it's not cleaned." He said, "We'll get somebody in there to clean it, but it's not cleaned right now." So I went in and checked it out. And Texas, especially Houston, there's a bad cockroach problem. They got cockroaches that are this big, and I'm not exaggerating, this big. And I walked in, and I'd never really been exposed to cockroaches, and I saw this, so I said, "Boy, this is going to be tough." I had a sleeping bag. I threw it on the floor. I ran to like a Kmart or something like that was there. I was looking for the strongest stuff I could find, and there was this stuff called, I'll never forget the name of it, was called Decon Warpath. And you sprayed it, and it left a trail of powder, and it said that cockroaches won't cross that line. So I took it and I sprayed in the middle of the carpet a big circle
around your bed,
around my sleeping bag.
Yeah,
I just sprayed the heck out of it, and I put it on like a baseball foul line, just packed it on there. And I slept the first night like that. And any time my blanket moved a little bit, just, so I got through. I went to work the next day and started my new job.
If you don't mind, before we get into the work, so I had a couple questions in regards to a couple things leading up to that.
Absolutely.
So first off, any advice you obviously went through how many interviews you said? Upwards of 30?
I would say, over 30, probably maybe close to 35, somewhere in there. I don't remember exactly, but.
And in addition to that, what gave you the drive? Is there something inside or something that someone taught you why were you so determined to make sure that you got a job and you were able to make a living for yourself? Was there something that you remember that was really pushing you at that point?
I had a passion for it. I lived in Grosse Pointe, but not the huge mansion area or anything like that. We lived in a very modest 3-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. I have 2 brothers, so the 5 of us had 1 tub and shower combination, 1 sink, and 1 toilet. To if we were going to a wedding, we were all on top of each other in there.
Yeah,
So I grew up very modestly, but I loved the houses in Grosse Pointe. I'd ride my bike down, but I used to go fishing a lot off the pier right by where the Lake St. Clair turns into the Detroit River, and I'd ride through a real wealthy street that goes along Lake St. Clair. It's called Windmill Point Drive down in Grosse Pointe Park, and it was just I was enthralled with the homes. I loved them. So that kind of I think was my early thoughts on how I got into the business that I got into. Like I say, it was just like a growth thing. When I decided that I wanted to focus on becoming a builder, and specifically in the back of my mind, I wanted to build those kind of houses,
the beautiful
mansions, those big, beautiful mansions, and that kind of thing. So I wanted to do whatever I could to stay in that industry, and there was nothing available in that industry here. So I made the move and went to Texas to do that. Now, it wasn't a custom home builder.
Yeah.
Now, when you
were just getting started, you were willing to make that sacrifice to.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier when my uncle's his homes were more track homes.
Yeah.
They were more track homes. These were truly track homes.
Okay.
They had Fox and Jacobs had about I'm going to say about 15 subdivisions in the whole Houston.
Well, and I was gonna say I would have to imagine at that point Texas didn't have much going on. There was probably a ton of growth happening at that time.
Because we had just gone through the energy crisis and all the oil and everything came into Houston, and so it was it was that economy boomed longer, but then it went into a lull starting in about 1980. 83, the beginning of 84, somewhere in there, the economy dropped there, and they were building like crazy. But then all of a sudden they had all these vacant buildings, and it was so they overbuilt, and that kind of dragged the economy down. A lot of the people who had offices in old buildings went into the new buildings, but now there was vacancies all over in old buildings and new buildings. So it was it was kind of like a delayed hit on them.
Yeah.
And my timing there was good because I decided I wanted to go back to Detroit because the economy was picking up. Ronald Reagan was president. He cut taxes. He turned the economy around, and the economy was starting to grow and boom again in Michigan.
And so how long were you in Texas then?
I was in Texas for 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah. So I and this, like I say, they were a track home builder.
What were the most valuable things that you learned in those first 4 years? Because that would have been your first, I would say, legitimate 4 years in work, because obviously the past was with your family and you were kind of doing odd jobs. And this was a very planned out, specific job that you had for those 4 years.
Yeah, well, a couple of things I learned. First of all, because they were a track builder, My first job there was I was the plan coordinator.
Okay.
And basically what that was I had to get plans out to the field crews. I had to get plans to the government, for the municipalities, and they had a multitude of plans. They had like probably, I'm going to say, basically they had my like maybe 7 or 8 plans, but every time they did something a little different to a plan, they made it a whole new plan. And so they had like maybe 150 plans that you could build from. But some homes were virtually identical, but one maybe had a fireplace, just literally little things like that.
Yeah.
So as I was plan coordinator, I talked to my boss about it. I said, "It's ridiculous. You got the same plan over and over. We got a plan number 815. We got 8 of them. There's 8 different 815s. It was just kind of crazy." He said, well, what do you think we should do? And I said, well, I don't know. Can you? I think we should like maybe incorporate them and maybe make the fireplace an option, and that French door to the outside an option, and whatever else.
So you were already.
So he said
you were already dabbling in the custom.
Yeah, so he talked to the head of Houston, and he said, we're going to do that. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, I want you to see if you can find a draftsman, we'll get him in house, and we're going to change the plan system. I said, great. So I went to some local high schools, and that had drafting programs, and I left information on what we're looking for. And this kid, he was like a junior in high school at the time, he came in and wanted to come in and do it. And so it was a part-time job for him. He'd work a couple of evenings a week and maybe on a Saturday or whatever. And I would give him the information, and he would just draw and change the plans. And we incorporated like 150 plans down to about, basically 8 or 10 plans. And it affected so many things. And that's the thing about a company that's a track builder in the production. The company, all the people in the field, all the people in the office, not all, but almost all, everybody was employed by the company. There were a few trade contractors that were subcontracted, like the plumbers, the electricians, the heating guys. They were all subcontractors, but everybody else, the brick masons, the drywall guys, the carpenters, all those guys were all employed by the company. And they had 3 field crews. Each field crew had about 5 subdivisions each. And they had a plant in the back where they built wall panels, and they stocked all the cabinets and all that kind of stuff. There was a couple of big buildings out in the back. So they were always manufacturing the products they needed in the plants, and you'd get them to the field. Each plan demanded what's called a load list. So you'd get the lumber takeoff on let's say it was the first time you were building that plan. You'd get the lumber takeoff on it done. You'd get all the takeoffs, all the estimates on the whole house done. And the very first one you build, my position was plan coordinator. I had to go out to the field and make sure the plans were perfectly accurate. And if the superintendents had any issues with it, we would talk about it. I would change the plan to what needed to be done, all that kind of stuff. So when you get that second house built, you're like to a T.
Yeah.
And I mean literally to the 2x4.
Yeah.
So the pile of scrap that's left when they're done framing is just minimal.
What strikes me about this experience, in contrast to what you were doing before, is that you had all the infield experience before. You watched what was going on, how the jobs were getting done, how the construction was getting built, but you didn't have any idea of how it all came together. But now moving into Texas, it sounds like you're doing the opposite. You were seeing the back office stuff and the coordinating and how it all comes together to even allow the opportunity for the contractors to work. So was that a big experience for you to kind of see the opposite side of things?
Absolutely, it was. But it was again, it was fun for me. I enjoyed it. It was. We had to work. We were almost the department I was in was called construction services.
Yeah.
And we had to work with the sales department. We had to work with the mortgage company. We had to work with the field. We had to work with outside vendors and outside contractors.
Yeah.
So we had to make everything work for everybody.
Yeah.
Sales needed we were changing to this option program on the plans. Sales needed a list of what each option cost to add.
Yeah.
And you had to have specifically by plan what options were available. Like we just at the time we just called them option A, B, C, D, E, and we progressed on down. We probably eventually would have ran out of letters, but we had about maybe 15 to 20 possible options that were available to at least one or all of the plans. So sometimes you might get a house that had options A, F, G, M, and P. Were available on that house. So they had to know by plan how many, all that kind of little detail stuff. And the same thing would be for the shop, because you would have to add 22 by 4s if there's a fireplace or whatever the case might be. So all this stuff had to be integrated perfectly.
Yeah, it sounds like you learned a lot about the business, the entire business altogether, not just one portion of it or one section of it. How important do you think that is for people to look into in whatever industry they're in, understanding how the whole business works, not just their one individual piece?
It's very important. It's very important because if you can get glimpses of other areas and get a little bit of a feel for other areas, you know how they're affected by things. And that's great. It's me personally, it was a blessing that I got that job, because it enabled me to work with these other areas, especially the sales department. And
allowed you to transition eventually into running your own business. You had insight into all the different departments that were needed.
Correct. Exactly. And issues would crop up, and you could put the fires out, but you had to put it out in 8 different places instead of just one spot.
Yeah.
So, but what happened was we put this thing all together, primarily me quarterbacking it, but under my boss and with the kid helping us.
Yeah.
We put this whole thing together. We presented it to our the division manager for Houston, the guy that was all over all of Houston. And so he had me make the presentation to everybody. And at the end of the presentation, the division manager says, "No, we're not going to go with it. I don't think it's going to work." He just wanted to see if I was going to fight. So I didn't realize that. I was young. I didn't realize that. I just took it like somebody whacked me on the head.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny. So I went back and I sat down, and my boss had gone in and talked with him and found out that's why he said that. He loved it. He absolutely loved it, the division manager. And but he said that because he wanted to see if I was strong enough to fight and say, this is what we got to do. I'm telling you right now. But I was a kid. I didn't want to fight with the division manager.
Yeah.
But some people are that way. You learn when you're working with people, no matter how you're working with people, you learn different personalities, different ways to approach them. You learn how to work with each individual.
Yeah.
And that's so important. You'll always get the most out of somebody if you know them and you understand them.
Yeah.
So that's real important. So anyways, I got real excited. And we went and we implemented that whole plan. It led to a promotion for me, which was great. Got more money and a little more prestige. I ended up, my boss got transferred to be a division head at I think it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I took his spot. So I was the construction services coordinator or manager of construction services, which is our department.
At what age were you at that point?
I was 22, 23, somewhere in there. And then, so I did that for quite a while. And then the economy started softening in Houston, and they had to lay off a lot of people. Simultaneously, while we did that implemented the new system for the plans, we changed to a subcontract operation. So we took a lot of the people that worked for the company, helped them get into their own business, and we had drywall contractors, kind of like we have primarily up here in Michigan. Most things are all done with subcontractors.
Yep.
So they went to a more of a general manager. They kept producing all the panels in the back and the cabinets and all that stuff. Yep. But primarily we took the overhead of personnel down big.
I'm very curious now. I mean, you've worked for a company, you've learned a lot. At what point did you start to make the transition, or the thought, maybe even when did the thought come into your mind that maybe one day I want to own a company for myself, and that's going to be something that's coming in the near future?
Yeah, that would, and I wasn't far off from that. I had in the back of my mind before I turned 30, I wanted to be in business for myself one way or another. I was talking to some individuals about a job in Michigan, and I decided that I'm going to move back. I didn't have a job when I moved back, but I had some possibilities lined up that I could interview for.
Most importantly, you had experience on your resume now.
Oh yeah,
you weren't just the random kid going across the country to figure it out.
No question. And you know what? That's a great, valuable point you bring up, because if somebody wants to work, I don't care if you're sweeping closets out, whatever you can do. You go to a local retail store and you can help stock shelves, or you can whatever. Just get a job and start working, and you'll learn things about it that are going to help you for life, and you'll learn things about it that you like and you don't like. And if you like something, try and stay in that field. Yeah. And then you can grow. And you're young. You're starting. And the other important thing is, don't go out and blow your money. Yeah. If you want to spend money, that's fine, but put at least half of it away. Yeah. Especially if you're living at home and you've got a place to live. Put at least half of it away. Save it, because you're going to need it for something at some point in time coming up.
Yeah, and I mean, you bring up a really valid point in terms of you're never going to learn or get the experience that you need in order to know anything about life really without action, without going and getting started, because it could be the wrong answer, it could be the right answer, but you don't know until you start doing it. Yeah. And so you're going to continue to learn more and learn faster the more action you take and the more you start to head forward, and that's how you're going to figure out what you want to do.
You're absolutely right. But I mean, that applies to anything. I mean, sitting here talking with you right now, I could learn some things that may help me later. I mean, anybody you talk to, anybody you meet, get what you can out of them. Try to be with positive people who are going to bring you up rather than bring you down. Yeah. There's a interesting guy on the radio. His name's Dennis Prager. He's got a golden rule that he has. You have an obligation to be a happy and positive person.
It's a choice.
Because it's a choice. You're exactly right. It's a choice, but he brought it to a different level. He says it's an obligation because it's a proven fact that happy, positive people make the world a happier, more positive place. And the negative people that bring people down, they make the world a more negative place. So even if you have to force yourself to be positive, to be happy, just fake it for a while. And you know what? Eventually, just like any other habit, it becomes a natural habit.
Yeah.
And it
becomes real thing. Because good comes back to you once you've done that.
Absolutely.
You're rewarded almost for doing it in the first place.
Yeah, and